If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is Investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. If you reach out to me at my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. I'm really excited about it. In fact, if you go there to Spreaker.com and you look up DANNO HANKS, I've done 2 previous shows with Private Investigator to the Stars, legendary DANNO HANKS. We've done 2 previous interviews with him that are gold, that people love. One of my favorite guests to have on the show, we're very lucky to have him, just came out with a book called Hollywood Detective. I Was Tinseltown's Private Eye. Prince Harry's War, Book 3. Mr. DANNO HANKS, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm barely here, but I'm here.
Yeah, that's right. Straight from the hospital, practically, right? And I'm about to return. But thank you so much for coming on the show, DANNO HANKS. DANNO HANKS is such a gentleman. You have no idea. He's been so good to me and so kind to me. He's the kind of private investigator that other guys turn to when you get stuck. Okay, DANNO, how can I find this information? And instead of just saying, hey, man, pay me $1,000 and I'll tell you how to do it. I'll get the info for you. He sits down with me patiently and teaches me how to do it. God bless you, DANNO HANKS. But remind the audience, though, because they haven't heard you in about a year on the Opperman Report. Tell them, who is DANNO HANKS?
Well, I've been a private investigator for close to, well, actually more than 50 years, 51 years. I was licensed, or I worked under my late partner's license, Fred Vallis, for many years. And then I got my own license around 10 years ago. Well, actually 20 years ago, I'm sorry. Time flies when you're having fun. And then I got caught up in something that was just bizarre and ended up losing my PI license over it. Was a client asked me to do something that I normally wouldn't have done. But at the time I was, and I'm still am, on Percocet because I got serious back and shoulder pain. And apparently Percocet screws up your thinking. And I did something I probably wouldn't have done, which was in the place where it happened, it was simply an act of graffiti that was used to send a message to somebody that I thought was harassing my client. But it was really to send a message, the client, to send a message because the guy owed him $2.5 million. And that is a violation of what they call the Hobbs Act. That's making a threat across interstate lines to collect a debt. So, I got caught up in that, and I lost my license, and I'm right now in the process of regaining my license. But, I'm pretty much known as the chief detective in Hollywood.
No, that's true, too, man. You've always been good to me, man. Whenever you did me a favor, I needed info for you. God bless you for that, man.
My late partner said something when it came to billing. He said, milk the cow, don't eat it. That if you make a reasonable profit off of something, you'll have clients coming back to you over and over again, and you can milk the cow. But if you charge just an outrageous amount, which a lot of private investigators do, far beyond what is reasonable, they'll pay the bill once, and, hopefully, but they probably won't ever come back to you again. And my livelihood is based on repetitive work.
Yeah, you want to build that lifelong relationship with the client that whenever they're in trouble, that you're the first person they think of, Let me go to DANNO HANKS, get me out of trouble.
Most of my clients are in the entertainment business, and I usually deal through their lawyers. who will call me up and say we're having a problem with so and so, and a lot of times it's what I refer to as stalker removal service.
Right.
They'll get somebody who's stalking them. They want to identify that person, serve them with a restraining order, and make sure the restraining order stays in effect, essentially sending them a message that if they continue stalking the client, that they'll end up in jail. So I do a lot of that. It's amazing. I have never understood stalking. I mean, why would you make threats against somebody you don't even know just because of their image online or in show business or whatever? Oh, they played that part in such and such a movie, and he was such a mean guy. Well, he seemed to forget it was a movie. It was a part the person was playing, not them in real life.
Yeah, there's definitely a detachment from reality from those types. They're delusional. They're detached from reality. But what are you going to
do? There's a lot of people in this country that are detached from reality. I mean, I said before the most recent presidential election that I should have invested in stupid people because I would be a stupid people millionaire today.
That reminds me. Speaking of our current president-to-be, you sent me a text once. I said to you, hey, are you ready to talk about all those stories that you killed about Trump for AMI? And you said, yeah, I'm ready. I killed all those stories for AMI. What can you tell us about some of the stories you killed about Trump for AMI?
Well, I worked for a lot of tabloids over the years. I don't work for any tabloids now because, they're just mean. Most of them, they don't ever do a story, like they'll never do he saved a puppy. They'll only do he killed a puppy, And for a long time, I was on the staff of American media, which is National Enquirer, the Globe, and they would call me and say, so-and-so is trying to sell a story about this particular celebrity, and this celebrity cooperates with us. And so I would track the person down, we'd offer them a certain amount of money, and then they'd never publish the story. But the other person couldn't sell it because they had, sold an exclusive to the newspaper. And that was referred to as catch and kill. In the Ronan Farrell book, I guess he gave that particular phrase to it. But, I did that for many years. And one of the people they always had me killing stories on was Donald Trump. However, what really kind of let the dam loose was when Stormy Daniels decided to go ahead and violate the confidentiality order and release her story. And apparently it did no damage at all to him. It was like, okay, so what? Nobody cared. They could have saved themselves $130,000. Because that's apparently the way this country is. And, I'm not a big Trump fan, but I will say that in general, you shouldn't care what somebody's private sex life is about. Bill Clinton went through the same thing. He would have been better off if his response had been, it's none of your business, instead of I didn't do it. Because the crime is always the cover-up. It's never the actual act. And people seem to want to cover up things. And the fact is that most people apparently don't care. That's the world we live in today.
When you were covering up stories for Trump, did you ever hear the story about John Tino?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't believe so. I'd have to look through my files. I mean, I can do that, and that's how.
Well, to refresh your memory, Times Square, massage parlors, porn theaters?
I don't believe so. What year would this have been?
Oh, that was way back in the 70s, 80s, a long time ago.
Oh, I was doing it then. I only started working in the early 80s, and I worked for Hard Copy back then.
Yeah, his story came back up around the time that Epstein had gotten arrested. His story came back up to the surface, the John Tino's story. And he seems to have been hit the jackpot and disappeared from town. You know what I mean? Because no one could find him. And I seems to have, the people around him seem to be vacationing in France and things like that. What are we going to find in this new book? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Epstein was probably the longest running investigation that I did, because I was tasked by the Mail on Sunday and the Daily Mail to find to identify Jane Doe 102 and to locate where she was. And when I did, she produced that picture of her with the prints that probably circulated around the world several million times, and the money on that case was fantastic. But the details of trying to find her, it was just an interesting challenge, and I did locate her and got her to cooperate, which eventually led to his incarceration and alleged suicide. And I say alleged because it's amazing how guards disappear and fall asleep on the job, and somebody commits suicide.
Well, what do you think then? He was walked out of there, or it was murder?
I think he was murdered, but
okay.
That's just my opinion. I have no way of proving it, But and I don't think we'll ever really know.
And as far as the Epstein stuff, you once sent me a whole big bunch of stuff, okay, on Epstein. Some of the stuff, by the way, I can't get into because the password no longer works. Maybe you can help me out with that. But lists of massage people that worked with Epstein and things like that, and all kind of things that were previously sealed that were just recently unsealed, you sent me. So I can definitely testify to all that. What about now? You're the guy originally who obtained the flight logs?
Yeah, I had the flight logs. What had happened with those flight logs was, when the police had done a raid on Epstein's house the first time, not the second time when he was, somebody in his household, and I believe it was just one of the staff members, took that flight log from his private jet and tried to sell it, and it ended up getting purchased by a detective down in Florida, and that detective offered to sell it to me. And, I got it. And it had all the names of everybody that was ever on a plane with him going down to his little private island.
And then it was much later that those flight logs were published in tabloids, right?
Well, my client, essentially paid the money for me to buy those flight logs, and the client was, the Mail on Sunday and the Daily Mail. So, yeah, they somehow got released and eventually ended up in part of the court files and public records.
Gotcha. Hey, what are we going to find in this book, Hollywood Detective? I was Tinseltown's Private Eye, Prince Harry's War.
Well, it's being published by a company in the UK called Yellow Press. And they're doing a whole series on essentially Prince Harry's war against the tabloids. Now, Prince Harry had a lot of invasion of privacy issues, because what they were doing, and the term I've never understand how I got this phrase, in the UK they call it blagging. They would take my reports that had information in them that would allow them to do what they call blagging. And blagging is where you pretend to be that person. And because you know how to answer all the questions, like say if you're going to go and try to get a copy of your phone bill or a credit card statement, they're going to ask you things like your social security number, your date of birth, your mother's maiden name, maybe the last couple of addresses. But they ask you questions that for you to prove that you are who you say you are. Well, if you have certain background reports, you can answer all those questions.
Exactly.
And that's what they started doing, is they started looking into Meghan Markle's information, and they said, "Oh, you had a hotel bill where you ordered room service for 2 on such and such a night," and started getting her phone bill and seeing that she was calling Prince Harry and vice versa on a regular basis. And at the time, I was asked to do searches on Meghan Markle. I had never heard of her. Name didn't mean anything to me. She wasn't yet famous. And years later, I was contacted by Prince Harry's attorneys, and they said, "This is what the tabloids were doing with the information you provided." And I was kind of shocked about it. I mean, it's pretty hard to shock me, but I felt it was an invasion of privacy, and they asked me if I would come to London and testify on behalf of Prince Harry, and I went there, and the judge in the case completely relied on my testimony, and Prince Harry won that lawsuit. I guess that was against the Mirror. He's got two or three more lawsuits going, and I may have to go back to London to testify on those cases.
Yeah, in the States, we refer to that as pretexting, where you get the guy's social security number, his date of birth, his mother's maiden name, and then you call up wherever, and you pretend you're him, and they send over the information.
Yeah, for a long time, I didn't know how it was done, because I never did any pretexting calls myself. Yeah. But for years, I used a service to reverse telephone numbers and get toll records, and it was a company down in Florida called Action Research.
Sure.
Well, the feds put them out of business.
Yeah. They seized all their computers. Yeah, that was over the HP scandal with that Fiorini, right?
Yeah. What happened was I guess the president of Hewlett Packard was essentially snooping on all of her employees, and she would get her employees' phone records. Her reasoning behind that was that she felt that some of her employees were selling trade secrets to competition. But the fact is that no excuse for invading somebody's privacy will fly. And a lot of people say, well, don't you do that? No, I have to ask for a legitimate reason. If somebody wants to do an investigation, I don't do it just because they're curious about this person. I said, what's the situation? Is this person bothering you, or is it like an ex-boyfriend who's stalking you? What's the threat? And I have to have a reason before I do an investigation. And they have a law. It's called the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. Those are 3 senators, I believe, who created the act, which is also constantly being updated. And it lists what they call permissible purposes. Here are the reasons you have to get in order to get into the databases.
Right. And if you don't follow those procedures, they audit those databases, and they'll pull you in and say, "Hey, man, Hank, what's going on? Why are you doing searches on these people?" Right?
Absolutely, you can get your accounts shut off if you, and celebrity names are flagged.
Yep.
There was a lot of times I'd run celebrity names, and I would get audited, and then they started realizing that, well, I live in Hollywood, and that most of my clients are celebrities, and the person they're suing is another celebrity. So a lot of times I would run somebody to just get a current address in order to serve them with legal papers. But yeah, they may be a celebrity in Podunk, Iowa, but in Los Angeles, they're just your neighbors.
But it's not like the wild, wild west where you can just do whatever you want like people seem to think. You really got to watch your step here. Now, you talk about action research, bringing back memories from the old days. Do you remember Victor Gazzetta from Staten Island who ran Smart Data?
Yes. I
man, Victor, we were all buddies, man.
But I know those people. The private investigation world is very small. I mean, every one of these associations, like California Association of Licensed Investigators, and FALI, which you have down in Florida, they all have conventions, and then they have international conventions. And at these conventions, they share who's a good source to get this or that.
Right.
And for years before there was all these computerized data, back when I first got in the business, long before there was, public access to an internet, you always had to have a source. I would have a source in the phone company who was willing to sell me information, or a source at DMV that was willing to sell me that wasn't exactly kosher. And
all you had was your Rolodex, of contacts and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're going old school. I mean, when I first got into the business and I wanted to get court files, I had to go down into the basement of a courthouse and go through the physical files and read the files and, photocopy the pages that I wanted.
Yeah.
Now, just about everything is available online. And, it's at your fingertips. There is no privacy anymore. Privacy is dead. And for the most part, you don't even need a private investigator to do something.
But a lot of that over-the-counter stuff, man, it's stale information, and you really don't get everything. But the reason why I brought up Victor Gazzetta is because you talked about the Graham-Bly Act. When they made financial pretexting for asset searches, when they made that unlawful, Victor Gazzetta, poor guy, man, who's an honest guy, legit guy. He gets a call from this woman, says, "Hey, I'm about to get married. Can you check out my fiance? His finances don't seem." And he did a pretext financial asset search at her bank, and they arrested him. And then they fined him, and he had to pay back all the money he ever made through his company, Smart Data. They took this guy and made an example out of him. I don't think anybody's ever been arrested since that I know of. But they took this guy and crucified him.
Well, many of the databases today kind of protected themselves from that. For the most part, they're located down in your neck of the woods in Florida, Boca Raton. But there are some databases that are actually located in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and so they're beyond the reach of the U.S. government. And you can as a last resort, ask one of the Israeli investigators to get the information you want. How they get it, I don't know, but they seem to have access to a lot more information than all the U.S. companies have.
Yeah. And by the way, too, when you're talking before about the UK phone hacking stuff, now you were brought in on that too, correct?
Yes.
How were they doing that with the caller ID spoofing?
People go, "Oh, it was phone hacking." Yeah. No, it wasn't. What happened was this was a case involving a young child that had been kidnapped and murdered. Her name was Millie Dowley, and someone came to one of the tabloids, I believe it was the News of the World, and said, "I have access to her cell phone." And they said, "Well, how did you get access?" And what it was is, back in the day, in fact, it's still the day, when you buy a cell phone and you put it online, it has a default password to get into your voicemail. And a lot of people never change the default password. And so people would get into cell phone voicemails just by trying the default password. And so in her case, they kept leaving messages in her voicemail that made it sound like she was still alive. And they did that for the purpose of selling stories and making money. And when the government found out about it, they started holding what would be the equivalent of congressional hearings into how tabloids operate. And that eventually led to the fact that news of the world had to be shut down. But that didn't slow people like Rupert Murdoch down. He starts another newspaper. It renames it essentially. So, yeah, he had to shut down one of his newspapers. Big deal. He's got all these other assets, including Fox News.
Hey, so when you were dealing with Prince Harry, did anything come up with his relationship, his friendship with P. Diddy?
No, nothing ever did, And I will tell you, in the defense of a lot of these people that are being connected to Diddy, is here he is a music mogul, and somebody might say, he might say to somebody that's an associate, hey, do you want to go to a party? And they get there and they don't realize what's going on at that party. But now their name's on a list as having gone there. So I'm not really defending them, but sometimes people get caught up in things that they have no control over or were not aware of. So you have to consider that when they start, randomly releasing names. My personal opinion is the guy is a monster and he needs to stay in jail.
What about you worked on the Michael Jackson stuff too, right? With Diane Diamond, who wrote a beautiful article about you, talking about how you deserve a pardon from the President of the United States. What's your first?
She wrote a book on Michael Jackson called "Be Careful Who You Love," and when I was working for Hard Copy, I was there in-house investigator. There was all these rumors going on regarding Michael Jackson. And so we were, people were dropping dimes to us all the time about him, and we would look into it. And so we started going after those stories about him. And I got to know just about everything you'd ever want to know about Michael Jackson. And after he passed away, I get a phone call from his mother. And she wants to hire me to investigate the doctors and the people that were surrounding him close to the time of his death. And I said to her, you do know who I am. And her response was, have you ever heard the phrase, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? And so I went to work for Michael Jackson's mother, and she paid me very well. And she probably did the right thing by hiring me because I already had a huge file. I knew everybody connected to him. And for the last 30 days of his life, I had him under surveillance. So I saw everybody that was coming and going from that house where he died.
And then what do you make of his death? A lot of people have a lot of suspicions.
Oh, no, it's a lazy doctor. Propofol is in the hands of an anesthesiologist is a good drug. They used it on me when I had my recent surgery, and they're going to use it again in another week. It has to be under the control of a licensed anesthesiologist, not some doctor in a home setting. It was a very dangerous thing to do, and when it is used, it has to be constantly monitored. You don't walk away and take a coffee break while you have somebody under propofol. And it was an accident, but it was an accident that was caused by negligence. And that's what the civil jury against him, and I think there was a criminal case against the doctor as well.
Yeah.
That's what it was. He was busy doing other things, and he had this guy on a propofol drip. So it was no big surprise that he died while on that drip. So,
but like in this article that Diane Diamond wrote about you, she talks about your military career, your work as with the DEA and the Drug Enforcement Administration, different police organizations and stuff like that, and your personal life, buying groceries for people who are in need. And her plea is for you to get a presidential pardon for these felonies. Why don't you make your case on that?
Well, here's the deal. I mean, the other day, Biden pardoned his son. And I don't blame him. You know, your family is family. And if you have the power to do that, go ahead and do it. But the fact is that if you go through the normal process of applying for a pardon, it takes years. And you may go through 2 or 3 presidents before your case even gets up to bat, if at all, where other people can just, if they're friends with the president, can say, oh, by the way, can you pardon my buddy? And they'll do it. And almost nobody who goes through the process ever gets a pardon. It always is, who do you know? What do you know? And that is wrong. I think that the pardon system should be changed to where they do vet these people that are seeking pardons, and if they legitimately deserve one, it should go immediately to the president's desk. Most presidents that grant pardons do them when they're on their way out of office. It's their last term, and it's Christmas time, and they issue these pardons. The article that Diane Diamond wrote, which people can Google, was called "They Pardon Turkeys, Don't They?" And that's true. They do pardon a turkey every year. But I have been waiting for presidential pardon for over 20 years, and I did. I worked for both the DEA and the FBI. Was undercover inside the Gambino crime family for the DEA for the FBI for 4.5 years. I did stings all over the U.S. for the DEA, putting drug dealers off the street. And in many cases, I was able to tip them off to possible hits on DEA agents and prevented somebody from being killed. But they have never taken any of that into consideration. Joe Biden's son, really, though, his crime was lying about drug use and lying about stuff on his form to buy a gun. Yeah, it's a serious crime. My crime was graffiti. And I ended up doing 14 months in prison for what it was essentially graffiti. You know, it doesn't seem fair. And a lot of people might say, oh, you're whining about that. Well, yeah, I did it. And I own up to what I did, but it didn't deserve 14 months or to lose my PI license over it.
Well, then, but how would it change your life today if to get the pardon?
Well, it actually wouldn't. I mean, but it's a personal thing. I'd like to die with a clean slate. And if any of your audience out there actually has connections, that would be great.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah, we got the connections. We just don't have the $2 million to help you out there.
Oh, well, yeah, there's that. I mean, it really doesn't change your life because I don't live any differently today, than I did without having that pardon. I have a clean slate in the state of California because in California, that's a pre-existing thing to getting a pardon, which is called a certificate of rehabilitation. Yeah. What they do is they wipe your slate clean, but it's not a pardon. And I got a certificate of rehabilitation for all my crimes done in California when I was a kid. I used to, really get into a lot of trouble as a young man and was in and out of jail. And I got out of jail once and was looking for a job. And I read an article in the paper in San Francisco that said, wanted private investigator, no experience necessary, will train. And I went to respond to the job 2 days after I got out of prison. And I basically told the guy the truth. I said, I just got out of prison. Here are my crimes. And he said, you're hired on the it takes one to know one basis. And it turns out he was right. Who better to catch crooks than a crook? There's a TV series long ago that was out called It Takes a Thief.
Yeah.
And the scripts were written by a guy named Roland Kibbe. And I was the technical advisor on that show. Roland Kibbe used to come to the prison at Terminal Island, and he would, there was a writing class there, and he would, participate in the writing class. And basically he was there to steal stories from the inmates and use them on that show. And when I got out of prison, he hired me as the technical advisor on the show. Because, yes, it does take a thief sometimes. And with the exception of this graffiti case, I haven't committed a crime in over 50 years, half a century of going without a crime, and this is hanging over my head. I think that the good should outweigh the bad. So if there's somebody out there, do what you can.
Yeah. Well, quick question. What year was this that you got out of prison and that this PI hired you right away?
It was about 12 years ago.
Okay.
He calls me up out of the blue, and it was right after the Brits had passed the law saying you couldn't use PIs. So I lost all my work from the British tabloid.
No. I'm saying when you first got your first PI job, that guy who hired you right out of prison, what year was that?
Oh, that's got to be, it's 51 years ago.
Yeah, see, because no one would do that today. Forget it. These guys are a bunch of, washwomen now. They're afraid of their own shadow,
Yeah, this guy, his name is Jack Immendorf. The company still exists.
Yeah.
He's still alive. It's one of the largest PI companies in America. It's not as big as Kroll, but it's pretty big. And he was the guy to go to in San Francisco. And I, he was just one of those guys that was willing to take a chance on somebody. He took a chance on me, and he got me involved in the business, and I've never looked back. I enjoy solving puzzles, and every one of these cases that I take, people give to me, they're a puzzle. That's and sometimes I get more frustrated by not being able to figure something out than I do with, am I going to make $1 off of this? I become, a little obsessed with taking a case and not being able to figure it out. So
yeah, so often like a client will call and you have to tell them, well, listen, let me think about this for a couple of days, and you really sit home and think. You really obsess on how to take care of this problem. And you don't just, it doesn't come off the top of you. Maybe for DANNO HANKS it does, but for me, it takes me a couple of days to really get my gears in motion.
No, the majority of my cases I can figure out in minutes. I crack them within minutes. But my late partner, again, had a rule is you never solve the case on the first day. Because if somebody figures out how easy it was, they're reluctant to pay you. Yeah. It's gotta look like it took you forever to figure this out, and you got a break and blah blah blah. But yeah, they're reluctant to pay you. I tell a story about something that was done back in the day when we were using other sources to get information. A woman came into our office in Marin County up in San Rafael, and she had a phone number that was on her phone bill. And I guess she suspected her husband or boyfriend or whatever was cheating on her. And she said, how much will it cost to tell me who belongs to this phone number? And I said, well, if it's listed, it'll cost you $100. If it's unlisted, it'll be more. It'll take some time. So she handed me the phone number, and I said $100 in advance. And right in front of her, I picked up the phone, and I called directory assistance, and I said, can you connect me to the public library at San Rafael? They connected me, and I said, can you connect me to the reference desk? Connected me. I said, yeah, do you have a Haynes directory there? Yeah. Can you look up this number? They looked up the number. I wrote down the information and handed it back to her. And she said, you called the library? I said, yeah. I said, now I'm going to tell you another story. And the other story I told her was, there was a woman who lived out on a farm, and she had a Sears pump, and the pump went out on her. So she calls up Sears to repair it. The guy comes out, and he looks at it, and he hits it with a hammer. and the pump starts working just right, continues working. She gets a bill for $137.15. And she's complaining about the bill, and she wants an itemized bill. So they sent her an itemized bill. It says, hitting pump with hammer, 15 cents. Knowing where to hit, $137. And that's the thing with PIs. Any good PI always knows where to hit.
And there actually is case law that allows attorneys to bill for their experience because, let's say it's a will or an affidavit or some certain type of motion. They have it already prepared. You have a template. But, the first time you made that template, it took 4 or 6 hours. And you're allowed to bill that 4 or 6 hours the next time you use it. That's perfectly legit. You get paid for your experience and your expertise.
You're billing for your experience, your education, the time you've been on. Because the fact that I can do something within seconds took 50 years of experience for me to get to do that in seconds, and that's what I'm billing for. I don't bill, and I still am the cheapest detective around. But I know which databases to look at and where to find the information they want to find, and it took me a long time to learn how to do that and to develop those skills, and I bill for that.
And a lot of these databases, too, there's a monthly fee just to be a member of them. They charge you $25 a month, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a base fee. They bill you whether you did any work using that database or not.
Right.
So you have to pay your sources, and a PI pays his sources first, because he doesn't want to lose access to what allows him to make a living. And I have months that go by where I don't get any work. And for the most part, November and December are always dry. You hardly make any money. And there's a simple reason for that. All businesses, every legitimate business in the country, works on the fiscal year, and they have a budget, and that budget is created in January. And because people never seem to figure it out, by the time November comes along, that business has run out of money, so they can't spend money to do stuff. The same is true of the federal government. They're on a fiscal year. So if you're a drug dealer and you want to do a major drug deal, do it in November or December, because you can pretty much guess that the guy who's buying your drugs isn't a Fed, because they don't have any money. It's a simple thing. I've probably given out too much.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Maybe you don't want to give too much advice. So, Danno, the book is called Hollywood Detective. I was Tinseltown's private eye, right? But you were also in a bunch of movies too. You also an actor, right?
Yeah, I've had a SAG card since I was a little kid. My grandmother was the original Kodak model, and she was a silent actress. My mother was a musician. She played keyboards over at Universal Studios, and I started working as an actor as a child because all of my brothers and sisters were put together in either modeling or acting to make a living. And a lot of people think, oh, you made a lot of money. No, you don't. You make minimum wage back in those days. And you have what's called a SAG minimum. So you may do a scene with somebody and get the day rate, which is now a little over $1,000 for a speaking part. But that's it. You get that, you may get one residual check after that. So unless you're a huge star that's making millions of dollars, those are few and far between. Probably less than a couple of hundred people in the business. But the rest of the working actors, they're getting by on just a very low amount of money. But yes, I get regular work, and now I get more work now because now I'm, play the dirty old man, grumpy old man parts, because I'm 78 years old. I just get finished doing a scene with Robert De Niro, which was very fun to do. And that movie's coming out, I believe, February 12th. It's called The Comeback Trail, and it'll be released through Paramount Pictures. So if somebody wants to catch it next year, they can.
Yeah, I pulled it up. I pulled it up. I thought it was an old movie you had done.
No, it's what you probably pulled up was the European version.
Okay.
Which is a good half hour shorter than the U.S. version. The rights to that film went through a long battle, and finally the writer-director got those rights back. He recut the director's cut, and that's what's coming out through Paramount. It's a George Gallo film, and like I said, they'll be able to get it through Paramount, I guess both digitally, and it'll be in theaters for a short time, but it'll be available on DVD and I guess for download. But like I say, that complete 2-hour version will come out, I believe it's February 12th with Paramount.
Well, you can't beat that, man, being on the same scene as Robert De Niro. What other famous stars have you been in the same film with?
Well, when I was a kid, I worked with John Wayne all the time.
Wow.
And I didn't get those gigs because I was in the studio. I got those gigs because John Wayne was my next door neighbor growing up in Newport Beach. And, our families knew each other. And so I was able to get work through him all the time. But, it's probably two big names in my history. I'm friends with a lot of well-known actors. One of my best friends is Barry Corbin, who lives down in Texas. Barry is probably best known for his role in as the general in War Games, but he's constantly working, and he's 84 years old. And his most recent thing was a scene in the final episodes of Yellowstone. But he's a cowboy actor for the most part, and he's still working at 84. I talk to him all the time.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, at Hollywood Detective, I was Tinseltown's Private Eye, the book by DANNO, HANKS, our guest today. What about any famous Hollywood cases you've worked on that you'd love to tell us about, and leave the names out because you can't talk about it, but maybe you could tell us the details of the case?
Well, there's actually one where the client gave me permission to use his name if I wanted to promote it, and he's now passed away, and that's Dick Clark.
Okay.
Back in the day, Dick Clark became friends with Fred and I because he was originally going to try to do the movie on our life up to that point. And one day, Fred and I are out on a surveillance, and we're working on whatever case, and we get a call, and he says, I need some help. My daughter has a stalker. And he gave us the details, and he said, when can you come and see me? And I said, what's your last meeting of the day? And he said, well, I'll be here in the office until around 7 o'clock. I said, okay, we'll come see you. Well, we pulled off the surveillance. We tracked down the stalker. We found the guy living in a hostel down in the beach area. And it turned out that he was from the UK, and he was stalking Dick Clark's daughter, apparently trying to get close to her so that he could get close to him because he wanted to pitch something to him. Well, it would have been easier just to go to his office and walk in the front door, but he was really, making her quite afraid for herself. And so we called up an FBI buddy of ours and said, hey, look, this guy's stalking Dick Clark's daughter. What can you do about it? That FBI buddy called up somebody from Homeland Security. They snatched him up that very same afternoon, put them on a plane back to the UK and put them on the no-fly list. So by 7 o'clock, we had already solved the problem. We go to see Dick Clark at 7, and he says, what are we going to do about us? And I said, it's already done. And we told him what had happened. We got him deported. And he pulls out his checkbook, and he says, how much do I owe you? And we tell Dick, we can't charge you for this. You know, you're your family. You know, we can't charge you. You know, maybe we'll need a favor someday. And Dick moans, oh, no, not the favor. And that paid off. A couple of days later, we were pitching a show to one of his producers, and Dick walks in, whatever this selling, we're buying it today. And so we sold a TV show to him that day. And that was Caught in the Act. It was aired some 20 years ago.
Legendary DANNO HANKS. So, DANNO, now, as far as what the audience can do to help you get this pardon, do you have like one of those online petitions, hey, get DANNO HANKS, where people could sign, something like that?
No, I haven't, but, you know, I mean, they do an online petition thing at the White House if somebody wanted to start. And it takes 100,000 signatures. I believe it's 100,000 signatures to get the president to fast track it.
Yeah.
The person himself can't start that. Somebody out there has to start that petition. And, you know, it'd be great if somebody wanted to start, but, you know, I doubt if they're going to get 100,000 signatures between now and when the new president comes in. And I certainly doubt that the new president is going to want to pardon me. You never know, though. He might, but it's not likely. I don't think he's a big fan, even if he knows my name.
You don't think he knows your name? I'm pretty sure he does. He seems to be a very. I made a joke once in front of another private investigator back in New York, and it was about Trump and Marla Maples. And because we knew where Marla Maples was hiding out after she became exposed by the press. And I made a little joke about we should tap the phones and sell it to the media. And I made a joke to another PI who's very close to Trump. And I was at the U.S. Open, and Trump was giving me dirty looks the whole freaking time. So I'm pretty sure if he knew my little role in that, I'm pretty sure he knows yours.
Well, I am named in Ronan Farrow's book, Catch and Kill.
Right.
And I'm on a single page. After, you know, when I got alerted to what was going on with the tabloids, Ronan Farrow came to visit me, and this is before he was in the middle of writing Catch and Kill, and he said, I want to see if you ever searched for these names, and he started giving me all these names, and there were people associated with Trump. There was the Dino, who was the doorman at Trump Tower, you know, is on there. And all these names he was giving to me, I'd search my computer hard drive, and they were showing up. Because the way the tabloids worked when it came to me is they would never tell me why they wanted me to search for a certain person. They just want me to find out their details. And then they'd send somebody else out there, usually a lawyer, that would, you know, go to them and offer them a certain amount of money to buy up their story. So I never knew until he started rattling off these names to me. And the same thing was with Prince Harry's guy. Information only flows in one direction. And that was the same for when I was working with the DEA and the FBI. Federal agencies, and for them it's a different reason. They will say that so-and-so is a target. Let me know everything you can find out about this guy. And they don't give you any feedback when you tell them stuff. And the reason that is that they want to make sure that you're not regurgitating their information back to them just to make a buck. You're actually giving them, raw, clean information. So they have a reason. The feds have a reason why they do things that way. But the tabloids do not. Their reason is they don't want you to know so that you'll tip that person off.
Right.
Their reasoning is a little different. And I don't have any reason to think that they've changed their policies, even with all the new laws that have been passed.
What about conflicting investigations? You ever be investigating somebody, you get a call from the FBI saying, hey, lay off, we're working on something big over here, and you're sniffing your nose around the wrong place?
I have had that happen. A very few times, probably less than a half a dozen, but I figure out a way to get out of continuing the investigation without, saying why. I've also had situations where I have a list of certain people that I will not do an investigation on, and mainly because they're personal friends of mine. I have a lot of celebrity friends, and over the years, their names have come up, and I'll say, you need to find somebody else who's a conflict of interest, and I'll just tell them it's a conflict of interest. I can't do the case. But yeah, I have a list of maybe 20 people that I won't touch, and it's simply because they're friends of mine. I mean, I've lived in this town for a long time, and I got a lot of celebrity friends.
Okay, what's your policy? Because this happens a lot. When you're talking to a client, or you're just hired by a client, and then they start accusing you of, oh, you're on that, they got you, you're working for them now. Well, you must have had that happen, right?
I've had it. I say, I'm a private investigator. I take first come or first served. And you weren't the first to come. That's simply it. And I don't think they've got any beef with that. I mean, they or at least they shouldn't, because that's the way a business is run. It's not like, and I don't advertise. I can't advertise as an unlicensed private investigator. The law in California and in most states, all the PI license does
allows you to advertise,
allows you to advertise.
So you can work for an attorney, you can work for an insurance company, a bail bondsman, you can work for a process server, you can work for all these people, no problem.
As long as it's their idea, and I get calls every day. And it's, but I don't solicit, I don't have a website. I don't have other than Facebook and Instagram, but I don't have an advertising website as Backstreet Investigations. Those were all taken down years ago, and I haven't had a need to restart them.
Yeah, but at the stage of your career, you don't have to worry about that. So we're talking to DANNO HANKS about his book, Hollywood Detective. I Was Tinseltown's Private Eye. DANNO, we got about 2 minutes left. What would you like to leave us with?
Well, still like to get that pardon. I would like to have people go and see some of my acting chops if they want to go see Comeback Trail. I've got another short film that I'm in with just me and Bob Gooten. Now, if people don't know the name Bob Gooten, they'll certainly know one of his most famous movies. He played the warden in Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, cool.
And we recently did a short film called The Carnal Soul, which is up for awards on all the short film festivals around around the world, and is up been for consideration for an Academy Award. So you might want to try to capture that. I think they can Google The Carnal Soul and watch the whole film.
And myself, too, I'm in a film that was just released called CIA Drugs Are Us. My portion is about Courtney Love and her connection to her dad. A couple of actors, one actor to another, although mine is it's a documentary, but from one film star to another. DANNO HANKS, my friend, I love you so much, man. Thank you so much. God bless your health. I pray for your health, my friend. I know you're going in for another surgery after this pardon. If there's anybody out there that can help DANNO with this pardon, it's very deserved. DANNO HANKS, thank you so much.
You be good.
What's that? Good night.
You be good.
Okay, man. Good night, Pharaoh.